Hi, I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and today I'm going to show you how to make a half square triangle. This is the block that we're going to make. It's a half square triangle because the grain lines are running along the outside edges here and the bias is along this, the longest side of your triangles. I talked about that in another video and I'll link to that in the pop-ups on this one. But today I'm going to show you how to make this block. One thing to remember is anytime you have a bias line, that is easy to stretch and warp out of shape. So that's the edge that we're going to be really careful with. And the method I use for making half square triangles really preserves that line without stretching. So that's what we're doing. The finished size of this block, the finished size, right now it's 4.5 inches. When it's on the quilt, it's going to be 4 inches because it's going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here and a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, so on all the sides. So it's going to be, we talk about the finished size of the block is the finished size in the quilt sewn up. So this is going to be a finished 4-inch block. We're going to make this out of 2 squares. For the finished 4-inch square block, you want to cut your squares 5 inches. So I have the white and the blue. They're cut exactly 5 inches square. And I've got another video that shows you how to do basic rotary cutting, and I'll link to that in the pop-ups. So to make a half square triangles, I don't cut them into triangles first because then you have that long exposed bias edge and it's easy to get it warped out of shape. Instead, I draw the center line right down the diagonal on my lightest colored block. And I just use a pencil. You can use anything you want. This is not going to be seen, so don't worry about making it be in a pen that'll wash away or anything like that. You can just use a pencil. And then you're going to line up your block, your light block with your dark block, and get them aligned as closely as you can around the edges. So remember, I cut this 1 inch bigger. This square is 1 inch bigger than my finished block is going to be. Now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to use this as a guideline, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on this side and 1/4 inch on this side, so that while we're sewing this bias line, it's stabilized by being in the whole block. That's not a cut edge that we're sewing that would be really easy to stretch. So we're going to take it over to the machine. I want to point out I'm using my special 1/4 inch foot that I showed you in the introductory video that showed the difference between half square and 1/4 square triangles and some of the special tools you need. So I do have my 1/4 inch foot on the machine, and I'm going to lay it down so that that edge there is right on my line. And I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm going to sew forward. And I'm just going to make sure that the line, that the edge here on this 1/4 inch foot is running right on that line that I drew. Back stitch when you get to the end. And now we're going to flip it around. And I'm not even going to take it out or cut my thread. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side of that line. Now we're going to take it over to the ironing board. Okay, now what we're going to do is cut it right on that line. And you don't have to be that fussy with it. Just grab a pair of scissors. If you've got a big stack of them, you can use rotary cutting, but since I'm doing just one, I'm going to cut these threads off of here. They irritate me. You just cut them apart. And then I like to lay mine light side down. I'll just do one of these. The first thing you want to do is just rest the iron on there. You want to set those stitches. That'll make the stitching just kind of sink into the fabric. Open it up by setting it with the light side down. When I open it now, I'm automatically going to have my seam allowance under the dark fabric, so it won't show. Otherwise it might shadow through the lighter color. Just kind of finger press that down. Again, you want to be really careful not to stretch on this bias seam. And then just set the iron on there too. And just iron that in place, or press it. And you have almost a half square triangle. We've got one more step that we're going to do back over at the cutting table. Okay, we have one more step that we need to do. First of all, we need to cut off these, people call these bunny ears. We're going to cut those off. We're also going to trim the block down just a little bit. This is actually a little bit bigger than it needs to be. And for this, we're going to use that ruler that I showed you in the introductory video. And this is, remember, it's a square ruler and it has a diagonal line running right down the middle. We don't care about those 60-degree lines for this. We want this 45 running right down the middle. So we're going to set this down on your block, and the first thing we're going to do is shave away just a tiny bit on this side. So I've got it lined up so that my diagonal line is running right down the diagonal of the block, and I have just a little bit of fabric peeking out on the sides. In fact, I need a little bit more peeking out there. And now I'm going to cut away. I'm going to cut on this side. So now this is a perfectly square cut with the diagonal running exactly at 45 degrees out of it. And I'm going to flip it over. Now this is the cut where I'm going to worry about cutting it down to size. So this time I'm going to line up my diagonal just like I did before, and I'm going to use the lines on the sides of my block. See, this one is the 4.5 degree line, or 4.5 inch line. Sorry, I'm cutting my block now to 4.5 inches. And over here, I've got a 4.5 inch line. So I've got my sides at 4.5 inches, and I've got that diagonal line running right down my seam that I made. And now I'm going to cut away any extra that's hanging out. Get away all those shreds, and now you have a perfect half square triangle. It's exactly 4.5 inches square, so it'll finish to 4 inches, and it's got that the diagonal seam running exactly corner to corner. So that's how you make a perfect half square triangle. It seems a little bit fussy with trimming away all of those edges at the end, but that's how you get a really, really, really precise block. And it's also a way to sew it without having any stretch at all on that bias diagonal line. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.